EWTN. Live true. Live Catholic.
Hello everyone, I'm Johnnette Williams and welcome to a special live simulcast edition of Women of Grace. It's great to be with you on both EWTN television and radio. And we've got our phone screeners standing by to take your calls. I'll be giving you the number throughout the program and will do my best to get you on the air when you call in. We're also ready to receive your comments by way of the chat feature on EWTN Radio's YouTube channel and Facebook page. I think we can all agree that we live in an age of distraction brought about by the technological advances of the last few decades. And I think we can also agree that for many, the effects have been costly. Studies are showing that we have been affected physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. The end results are anxiety, restlessness, boredom, isolation, and loneliness. Interior peace eludes us, and an interior state of agitation ensues. But technology is here to stay and likely to increase. So what are we to do? Is there a way to regain interior peace? Can solitude of heart and mind coexist with the digital age? And if so, how? Today's guests have the answer to these questions, and they are going to tell us how to achieve a more focused mind and heart, ready to rejoice in all that is good, beautiful, and true. So put your smartphone down and close the lid of your laptop as we learn how to have a well-ordered soul.
We are women of grace round the throne of the Lord Most High. And we lift up our praise from the depths of our souls. Hear our cry. Oh, Lamb of God, it is our one desire to see your holy face. Women of grace.
St. Augustine defines peace as the tranquility of order. But more often than not, we swim in a sea of turmoil brought about by a disordered use of the goods God gives us. Perhaps the keenest example of this is the overpowering influence of technology. In the past few decades, technology has challenged our interior peace and has challenged authentic communion and communication with others. How do we gain sobriety in our use of technology and restore order to our minds and hearts and souls? Our guests know, and they are going to tell us. Let's welcome Christopher Blum and Joshua Hochschild, authors of the book, A Mind at Peace, Reclaiming an Ordered Soul in the Age of Distraction. And so, you know, as we look at this big issue, I'm so glad we have two experts with us to help us resolve it, you know. It's true that the technological age has really put pressures on us that prior generations certainly were unaware of, and the effects are true and they're real, but it doesn't mean that we have to succumb to them. It means that we simply have to dig a little bit more deeply, exert our free will, and use our intellect to help us to find our way back to a more ordered kind of a life. So I'm really grateful you're with us. I'm really grateful for your book, and I want to remind all of you that the book is available for you at EWTN's Religious Catalog. Just go to EWTNRC.com. Order a copy for yourself and everybody you know, because listen, we've all got to get this thing right. We've been swimming around in this sea for far too long. So let's get started and let's talk about this. We talk about this age of distraction. We talk about this, you know, the press of technological advances and the way it's basically begun to disorder our lives. When we talk about order and disorder, what are we really referring to, Chris?
Well, you know, the world presents us, Johnnette, with so many good things, right? And what's remarkable about this technology is that it's answering a deep need in us, right? The promise of being connected with friends who are far away, right? Or the promise of answering a question that we really want an answer to, and answering it quickly, right? But these goods have to be put in the right order with higher goods, right? It's one thing to be in touch with a friend. It's another thing really to serve that person, right? Again, it's one thing to know some disconnected truth. It's another thing to know the highest truths and to rest in that knowledge.
Yeah. Well, as you share that with us, I'm very aware of the fact, Joshua, that, you know, I think one of the real maladies that's developed is an insatiable curiosity for things that we really don't need to know.
Yeah.
The click of a mouse or a key on a board is going to bring us fonts of information, but also I think kind of gives us a disordered curiosity about others that is a type of voyeurism. And here I'm speaking really about the social media sites.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think you're using exactly the right word, curiosity. And curiosity is a good example of what Chris is describing. There are goods, and it's healthy for human beings to desire these things. And so the desire to be connected, the desire to know, the desire to be relieved of ignorance, that's good. But like all of our appetites, the desire to know can be rightly ordered or disordered, and that's what we mean when we say that people have an unhealthy curiosity about what other they're gossiping or they're wasting time trying to find out trivial things instead of what's really important. But we often don't have the language to describe this and to understand what would be the difference between the ordered pursuit of meaningful knowledge versus disordered curiosity.
Yeah. Well, and you talk with us a little bit here, Chris, about the whole notion of what is valuable, and ultimately the desire here is to be of service to the other. I mean, it's to live a life in love, which means an act of self-donation, a gifting away of ourselves. I think one of the byproducts of this advancement of technology, and it isn't so much the advancement of technology, that's a good, we've discovered so many things, so many beneficial, ways in which we can charitably help people, health-wise, emotionally, psychologically, in all of these ways, spiritually, but it's our disordered use of them, and this comes back to this whole issue of hierarchy of values. We've lost our way. We don't really know where we're supposed to be heading right now, nor do we know how to get there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I think that that disposition to make a gift of oneself that you're speaking about, Johnnette, here. This is harder for people to have as a settled disposition when they're living in a world in which the family is breaking down, for instance, just to pick the top cause, right? And so the problems that we're seeing that relate to technology addiction are manifesting themselves in the scale and scope in which they are because there's already a problem in terms of the way people are experiencing life, the way they're living.
Yeah, and we can lament all we want, about the realities that this is imposing. The fact of the matter is, though, we're not going to, technology is not going away.
Right,
it's only going to increase. So the question is, do we use technology or does technology use us? And there is a manipulative factor with regard to a lot of this that in a certain way promotes a technological addiction, as you're talking about. I mean, how do we see this being displayed through some of the common things that we do every day on the internet or on our smartphones?
Well, I think everybody experiences it somewhat differently, but the kind of term that Chris used, addiction, is something that has been applied, and I think different people recognize that either in their friends or even in themselves. The feeling that you get when you've spent too much time watching television, binge watching, is now a phrase, right, that didn't exist once upon a time. Or going on Facebook to think that you're just going to check in with a few friends and then realize that hours have passed while you're curiously, tracking down information about people. Addiction to video games, especially young men find themselves sort of, and a lot of these things have been designed to get us hooked, right? So it's not accidental that they're addictive. But here's a little sign of hope, because I don't want to sound like it's all doom and gloom. In a sense, the feeling that people get, of anxiety, of distraction, of feeling kind of dissipated and wasted, that's healthy, right? It's a signal. It's, you know, it's like when you eat too much and you feel sick. Like that's a sign that pattern of behavior is not sustainable, and you're going to have to develop a little self-control to avoid that in the future. But you know, we have established arts of health, and parents pretty much know how to teach their kids not to eat too much sugar and things like that. We haven't yet learned how to discipline ourselves about overindulging the stimulation of digital technology.
Yeah,
but we all feel sick.
Yeah, well, and we wonder what that malaise is. You know, why is this? What's overtaken me here?
Yeah,
and we don't really put it together, and that's often the case. So as time goes on, we discover these things, and your work helps us to discover them, because you draw out, here's a problem that we've got, folks, and you know, but there is a way to correct it, and we're going to be talking about that. But I want to talk a little bit about the you know, real effects of this psychologically and emotionally, and even the reorientation of our brains. You know, we talk about the plasticity of the brain, and you talk about this in your book. I don't think that we actually understand what this is going to do to individuals in future years. I'm thinking particularly about children here.
Sure.
Yes.
The reason being that for so many parents, you know, the iPad or the computer has become a babysitter.
Yes.
And so children are consuming this stuff.
That's right.
As their little brains are developing in the very early years of their lives, you know, down to 1-year-olds who are watching, you know, Dora the Explorer on their iPad. You know? And this has a direct impact, doesn't it, on the way in which these children will socialize later, the way that they'll develop, and the way that their brains are going to function.
Yeah, that's right. So it's always been understood that we learn by imitation, right? So the child learns to form words imitating the mother and the father speaking and so forth. And the digital technology in the form of an iPad, for instance, is no different, right? We're just substituting a living person for a two-dimensional image that's a little bit more startling, a little bit more colorful, a bit quicker in motion and so forth. In other words, it does the work for the viewer, right? I mean, this is the secret of, I mean, it starts with television, right? And this is just the logical extension of it, is that the viewer has very little to do. He's offered the focal point, you know, the light shines in a particular place, things are perhaps scripted, right? And so there's a deeper passivity. Whereas when we're interacting with a person, we're constantly adjusting to all manner of stimuli. And so I think even before they hook the electrodes up and watch the brain scans, right, we're all aware from our own experience that, well, yeah, immersing ourselves in screen time, that's just going to, there's going to be losses there.
Right. One of the key losses, I think, there's a book out there, I think it's called The Intelligence of the Mind. I think that's the name of it. And it has to do with the way in which the brain does develop. And, you know, when we come out of our mother's womb, clearly, you know, our brains are not fully developed, or we would never get out of our mother's wombs. You know?
That's right. Yeah.
So the brain continues to develop after birth. And one of the real keys that causes certain parts of the brain to develop, especially areas that have to do with security, the development of conscience, those areas of the brain come from the light in the mother's eye. Are you familiar with it?
No,
this is
something.
It sounds
so beautiful. Yeah. It's just so so beautiful because it's the way God created it to be. So babies can only focus about 18 inches. So if a mother's nursing her baby, there you got it.
Yep.
That's exactly. Yeah. So what happens is the mommy's looking at the baby's looking at the mommy, and mommy's looking at the baby with joy, which lights her eye, and that light in the eye actually begins to knit together, you know, the various cells of the brain to create those centers. You're not going to get that from an animated figure. No. You know, and so those parts of the brain are not developed well. Nor will you really get it from, you know, a worker in a nursery, you know, or in a daycare center, because there's so many children, they can't devote that time to them. So we end up with, you know, children who are very narcissistic, who don't really have the capacity intuitively to pay attention to the law that's written on their heart for what is right and what is wrong. And this worries me, frankly. As a grandmother, it worries me. You know? Yeah.
Right.
So we know that there are ways that we can begin to at least correct this problem personally and also socially. And when we come back from our breaks, we're going to continue with our discussion. Want to recommend this book to you. It is a good book. It's a great book. It's a book that you need to have. A Mind at Peace, Reclaiming an Ordered Soul in the Age of Distraction. It's available for you at EWTN's Religious Catalog. Just go to EWTN.com. Order your copy, and one for everybody. Especially, I think it's important for young parents, right? I think it's important for young parents, but all of us too. We're going to be right back, inviting you to stay with us. Hello, friends. I am happy to invite you to become a member of Women of Grace Exclusive. That's right, an exclusive membership. By becoming a Women of Grace Exclusive member, you will have anytime, anywhere access to a vast library of resources, including our television programs, radio shows, and podcasts, our archived webinars by outstanding presenters, church documents and articles, and so much more. It's affordable, educational, and inspirational. With one click, more than 25 years of resources are yours on an exclusive basis. It's a membership program for such a time as this. Visit our website at www.womenofgrace.com for more information. Again, that's www.womenofgrace.com.
Within the walls of a monastery dwells a joy that can't be contained.
We are little fish swimming about in the ocean of God's love. And that to me sums up what it's been like to live in Carmel.
Enter the Carmelite Monastery of St. Therese, where devout lives of prayer and thanksgiving will unleash the gospel in Detroit on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
EWTN's Cathedrals Across America and the Diocese of Saginaw, Michigan invite you to a celebration of apostolic succession as they welcome their new apostle and shepherd, the Most Reverend Robert D. Gruss, from Holy Spirit Catholic Church. The massive installation of the Most Reverend Robert D. Gruss as the 7th Bishop of Saginaw. Today at 2 p.m. Eastern, here on EWTN.
Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guests today. We have Christopher Blum with us and Joshua Hochschild, and we are really, really encouraging you to get a copy of their book. It's available for you at EWTN's Religious Catalog. That's EWTNRC.com. I like to say it's the home of holy reminders. Also, this episode is available for you on DVD, so we invite you to get both of them. The book is A Mind at Peace, Reclaiming an Ordered Soul in the Age of Distraction. Again, it's available for you at EWTNRC.com. So we went off to our break there, and by the way, did you know that we're live today? So pick up the phone, give us a call. We're looking forward to taking your calls and hearing your comments as we go to the bottom of the hour. You know, we're talking about the fact that, you know, we can look at all of these maladies. They exist. It's important to know they exist. It's important that we step in and do something about them. But where do we go to find the way out of this morass that we've gotten ourselves into? Where do we go, Josh?
I hope you're not just trusting the two of us for the answers, and we don't claim to have any new ideas about this, in a sense. We go to the spiritual masters, we go to the tradition, we go to the saints, we go to classical philosophers who long ago discerned some of the mysteries and magic of the human soul, and have described the kinds of virtues that in any situation, the fundamental virtues that human beings need to have in order to to be their best selves.
Yeah, and here again, I'm thinking of that beautiful quote that we used in the introduction there from St. Augustine, that peace is the tranquility of order. And we're not at peace today. People are agitated. So we've got to return to that basis. Truth is truth. There's nowhere else to go. Lord, to whom should we go? You have the words of everlasting life, right? So we go back to the truth. So what do we learn? What do these ancient masters of the spiritual life have to say to us today in an age that they probably never could have even imagined would come?
Yeah, that's right.
Certainly not in the accidents of it, right? I mean, the accidents are bewildering. I mean, the data suggests that the typical user of a smartphone picks up the phone anywhere between 80 and 160 times per day, right? So yes, they wouldn't recognize that kind of behavior, and of course they would be quick to say that we need to marshal self-command and restraint here. But what they would be especially keen to tell us is that, as they do in their own works, is that any measure of self-restraint that we employ, fasting, for instance, or setting aside time for silence, right, is a measure that we always choose in view of the end, in view of a good, right? And in this case, as you've already mentioned, the goods are truth and love, right? So when what we're trying to do here is show that the measures that in some way we all understand we need to find, right? How do I use my phone less? How do I use it in a more appropriate way, and so on, right? That those measures make sense to us and fit into our lives the right way when we're rightly ordering our lives towards truth and love.
Yeah. Well, you divide the book up into sections here, and this is lovely, friends, and I want you to listen up here. The first part is living well, the second part is sensing well, and the third part is thinking well. And the word that's common to all three of those is the word well, right? Yeah. And now we also live in a very relativistic age. So how do we define well? Well?
I'm gonna appeal to Aristotle here and say that you can know that something is good if it is performing its function well.
Okay.
Things have tasks. Things are designed for a purpose, and you call something good if it's fulfilling that purpose. You say that something is serving its purpose well, if that purpose can actually be served by that thing.
Okay.
And we are ultimately made for communion with God. Friendship with others is an image of that and a preparation for it. Our desire for truth is a desire for God. Right? So the pursuit of truth and love, the pursuit of communion and conversation, face-to-face conversation with others and with God, is what we were made for. And the dissatisfaction, the anxiety, the depression that people feel is the pain of being cut off from those things.
Yeah, that's very true, and it's very real, and that's very deep, because sometimes we see the symptom. Again, we don't know the cause, and we're not really sure why there is a symptom. We don't know what to relate it to. And I'm thinking about, I was thinking about this earlier in light of a conversation I had this morning, and I was thinking about, well, how is it that you really determine if something is authentic, if something is true, and so you go to Ignatius, and Ignatius says, well, you pay attention to the movements of the soul. Is it consolation or desolation? Well, how do you know if it's consolation or desolation? Well, if it's producing anxiety, isolation, a lack of peace, a disconnection from people around you, inclusive of yourself sometimes, right? That's not a good.
Right.
So you look to I like to go to the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22, peace and joy. And one of those is modesty. And here modesty is not necessarily about dress. It's about the modesty of the human person. It's about the humility of heart. It's also about patient endurance and self-control. And so you have all of that in there. So if you know, friends, you're looking at your consumption of electronics, and you see that, if you're away from your cell phone, you're flipping out. Where is it? I need to have it. You got to begin to understand that there is something that is not good and beautiful and true that's going on here, something that's really taking the place of something else that you're really desiring, and that is that communication and that communion with others. So you talk about self-mastery, not a popular term today.
Fair enough.
You talk about fasting. That's a tough one in my vocabulary book, I'll tell you. So the fact of the matter is, but nonetheless, we've got to exert that part of the way in which we're made in the image and likeness of God with self-will to begin to control these things. How do we do that? How do we retrain ourselves in an age that's fraught with license?
Well, my first thought here, what we're looking for is a kind of ethic of attention, or a practice of attending to the things worth attending to, more than the things less worth attending to. I think it's interesting that those things less worth attending to, they seem to kind of know that they're less worth attending to, because they attach a chime to them to get our attention, right?
Very interesting, it's true.
They're going to reach out and grab us with some kind of notification from the app or something like this, or bright colors or moving, right? We're drawn to motion, right? And so the video culture is the logical extension here of, everything goes to YouTube, right? This sort of thing. So what are those things that are in fact most worth attending to, right? Well, to keep it at the level of conversation and communion and so on, right? We want to know truly how in our sharing of life with the friend, right, we can help that friend truly, right? Maybe it's a question of helping the friend understand something in life, navigate some period of complexity or distress, right, or come to terms with suffering, right, or to stir that friend to a noble purpose, right, whatever it might be. But we want to offer that assistance to the friend because we know we need that assistance from our own friends, right? And as you can imagine, right, to find that place in a conversation where you can really be helpful, you're going to have to do a lot more listening than you are talking. Right. So I think if we reflect on what's necessary for us to be the kinds of friends we want to be, we're going to realize, I've got a reason for turning off that chime, and I've got a reason for just settling down and waiting until this friend discloses what's really on her heart.
Yeah. How many times have we seen, and I've experienced this and probably done it myself, quite frankly, where you're in a serious conversation with someone and, you get the little ding on your phone that a message has come in and your attention is distracted from the person. But not only your attention, but even the gift of yourself is distracted, because somehow in your own mind, what's in that message has a value you assign to it. It doesn't have, you assign to it a value that is higher than this friend who is expressing themselves fully. And we turn to that. It's like the shiny object that keeps us over here. And I think that this is part of Satan's ploy in our day and time. I think there was a mystic, I used to think this was a passage in Scripture, but I can't find it, so surely it's not. It must have been a mystic who said that as we make our way towards the end times, in the latter days, we've been in those for 2 millennia. But as we make our way to the latter days, the ploy of the evil one will be busyness. He's going to keep us so busy we don't have time for the greater goods.
Yes.
And I think we should keep a little checklist every day. Just on the hour. What did I do in this last hour? How did I spend my time? Was it oriented towards, as you say, this orientation towards the good? Or was it oriented towards self-consumption? Was it oriented towards, this morbid curiosity? How does it go?
Your idea of keeping a journal is a great one, and in large part, what we're hoping is that people will simply become more intentional and self-aware about how we go about our days.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes seeing the problem in someone else before you can own it in yourself. A lot of teenagers, actually teenagers will be very honest about their dissatisfaction with technology use, but many of them first experienced their dissatisfaction with their parents' technology use. They've noticed that mom or dad doesn't make eye contact with them anymore, or will sit right next to them in the living room but be staring into a screen. And kids, it's not just infants. All children are hungry for their parents' attention, and they notice when they're deprived of it.
Yeah, and the most important gift that we can give is the gift of ourself. It's the gift of our presence. That is the present that we want to give to everyone, folks. The gift of our presence. Are we really present to the other when the other is before us, or are we allowing these sideline things to take our attention away from them? We're going to be right back, inviting you to stay with us.
Look who's reading the register. Go to ncregister.com and click on the 3 months free banner or call 800-421-3230. Subscribe today and get 3 months free of the National Catholic Register.
Kitchen. I love it.
Behold, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, join us in daily prayer and thanksgiving for Christ's most merciful heart. The Chaplet of the Divine Mercy, here on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
We believe that we have a miracle, a medical miracle, that we can attribute to the intercession of Bishop Frederick Barrett.
Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guests today. We've got Christopher Blum with us and Joshua Hochschild, and they are the authors of this great book. Want to make certain that you get out to EWTN's religious catalog to get a copy of it. It's going to help to reorient your life to that which is good, true, and beautiful, right? As we allow ourselves to be, what I want to say, enticed away from technological overload to the finer, more beautiful things that God would have us know. A Mind at Peace, Reclaiming an Ordered Soul in the Age of Distraction is available for you out there, as is this particular program. So go to EWTNRC.com and order your copy of the book and your copy of the DVD. We joked on the break here, isn't it funny? We're talking about technology and we're sitting in a technological soup right here, Yes. And I'm telling you to go out there to EWTNRC.com. All of these things are not, they're morally neutral. It's what we do with them. So to use technology to proclaim the good news of our Lord Jesus Christ is a wonderful thing. But we can't be gluttons even with the use of technology in that way, because we need to spend time with him in prayer.
Amen.
Can't be praying and reading and watching at the same time. We've got a Facebook question from Cindy. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okie doke. Cindy writes, much good can be done with technology. It is all in how you use it. Isn't that true? And that's what we were just talking about. So wax eloquent for us.
Yeah, as you put it, technology is morally neutral, and the onus is on us to figure out how to use something well, to to advance us towards our proper end, or ways in which technologies can harm us. Now, there are some technologies that we might think are more likely to cause harm than others, and there might be some forms of technology that we think can never be used in a good way, and so that part of the onus on us in using technology is being able to assess and judge not only how much to use something, but whether to use something, or whether there's any possible circumstances in which something can be used.
Well, that's a very important statement. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you this question. I mean, what is the arbiter in those? What is the standard that we use to evaluate? Sure. Is this usable? Is this ethically okay? Is this morally good?
Right. No, so I'm really grateful for Cindy's question. This is the kind of question one hears often. To me, the second thing to be said after what Josh had to say is that we need to look much less at one single use of something, right, picking up a hammer and doing something with it, right, and we need to instead be interested in the habit of use that tends to go with the tool, and the culture of human practice or human life that the tool tends to bring with it, right? Now, in the case of a hammer, well, I guess we get stronger walls or something like this, you know. But we're all well aware that the automobile led to wholesale changes in the way we live, right? So it's when we talk about the automobile, it's much less a question of what am I doing behind the wheel, though that's significant, and more a question of, okay, how has this changed the world I'm living in, and how should I be thinking about this, you know? And of course today, when new cities are developed, they're developed with a lot of walking trails and a lot of bike trails and so forth, right? It's really the same thing with this new technology here. What's starting to pop up are technology-free zones. Places in coffee shops where they install a Faraday cage where no wireless signal can come in, so that it's a kind of sacred spot in an otherwise secular coffee shop for people to converse with one another, you know? And so what that is it's a recognition that the moral sphere here is not just, you know, can I use this tool right now for a good purpose? The answer usually is sure, of course you can, right? And much more a question of, all right, how is this changing my world? And how do I need to address my life as a whole within the context of these changes?
Right. How is it changing the world, and how is it changing me? Right? How is it changing me? We've got Linda with us, and she's from Ohio. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm pretty well, thank you. I hope all of you seem to be well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. What is your question for us today?
A question and a concern. Sometimes I work with some children to help them finish up some homeschool things. And over the years, I've noticed that since they've been given more and more and more technology, in the beginning, they'd work better at their schoolwork. And now we're to the point, this is talking about 4 or 5 years, one of them shreds paper constantly while she's doing schoolwork. The other one's chewing off the ends of pencils. And they just can't, and you mentioned at the beginning of the show about anxiety. I'm wondering, how can we turn this around? Is it possible?
Yeah, and this is one of the effects that we see, Linda, that's happening as a result of technology. And again, the plasticity of the brain and the development of the brain in light of these things. I think that in so many ways, what we don't understand is that we're curtailing the natural talents and gifts children have. We feel these things enhance them, but sometimes we're curtailing them. The use of imagination, for example, and the ability to be able to play on a playground, you know, and just socialize with kids, which is really where they learn how to problem solve, is on a playground, is problematic. And it's anti-person. And I think that that's what causes this agitation, this anxiety, this fear. We know we're social creatures. We're meant to be connected. And this severs us from others, and we can't function. Somebody in solitary confinement will have a breakdown eventually. Can't function in that. So what do? Pull the iPad away.
Well, I mean, that's the short answer, is kids in general are exposed to too much technology too early. There's science backing this up. It's starting to become standard part of pediatric advice to tell parents to limit their children's use of technology. On the one hand, this is kind of a no-brainer, and you'd expect that to be common sense. But on the other hand, we kind of needed to learn that through experience, and some parents need to be reminded of that. And actually, I believe that in the next, in the short range, we're going to find out more and more ways in which we have hard evidence about the ways that technology is damaging, especially the development of young people. But even before all of the scientific research comes in, we have a sense that our culture is changing, and that we need to be more intentional about it. So most mothers didn't need to wait to hear the latest neurological studies to realize that maybe they should supervise and limit their children's exposure to technology.
Yeah, and I think here that the root cause is not so much the smartphone, but it's mass communication generally. And so when we look back at the early 20th century, what we see is that wise students of human nature and culture are saying, with respect to the radio even, the kinds of things that need to be said today, right? So, case in point, what's so wonderful about the radio, say in 1930 or something? Well, now I can hear the world's best violinist play that concerto that I love so much, right? Whereas otherwise I had to figure out a way to get myself to Boston, maybe once in my lifetime to hear it, right? So musical performance left the living room, it left the hearth, and it went into the radio. And the same thing has happened all the way through, right? So now that we have these marvelous screens, right, we can call up these beautiful artworks instead of sitting there and sketching something ourselves or admiring something that our child has sketched, and so on, with all manner of human engagement with the senses and with the world, right? I think that it's understandable, right? We love excellence. We love seeing that really amazing athletic move or whatever it might be. But we need to recognize that there's a loss there together with that gain. And if we become passive with respect to any of these matters, these are real human excellences that are being lost.
Well, we're down to our last minute, so I cannot get to the rest of you who are calling in with questions for our guests today. But if you were just to give us, one type of, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, we're going to a break. Very good, thank you very much. So we can get to you, Anna, stay there. We're going to get to all of you too. But if you were going to give a parent a piece of advice, on what would be, one thing that they could do to begin to help their children to withdraw from the use of these items, what would you, I think probably you don't introduce them in the first place, but assuming that there's someone with us today, what can they do?
Well, partly it's providing some alternative. It's easy to say no, but it's hard to practice no if there's no alternative. So a kid who wants to watch another YouTube video is going to feel deprived if you can say no. But if you can develop habits where there are other things that the child likes doing, right? If you've helped the child learn how to draw, if you've helped the child learn a musical instrument, if you teach the child chess, if you model for them what it's like to have a good conversation around the dinner table. These are all skills that we need to learn. You don't automatically take pleasure in these things. You have to learn them well enough so that you can experience the distinct pleasures of these other forms of human interaction, which are not as immediate as the delight that the screen gives you. So that's my short advice. Give alternative, positive, non-digital activities.
I like that. And it goes back to a word that you mentioned earlier, Chris, and that was intentionality. So when we come back, we'll pick up on that note. Anna, we're going to be with you. Yay! Stay with us right here on Women of Grace Live. It is a live edition. Pick up the phone, give us a call. We'll be right back.
I encourage you to try to foster that vocation by responding to God's call, to His grace. And what is most helpful, that I've seen many men on the way to the priesthood and religious life is to get a good spiritual director, someone that can form you and help you to see things that you're not able to see and to see how God's working in your life to call you possibly to the priesthood. I also encourage you to pray a lot, asking for God's grace and for His help, and also to attend to daily Mass, and to be open to God. God can work through many things. He works through everything. God uses everything to call us. And if you're open, God will certainly manifest His will to you. And oftentimes it comes through other people, and things happen to us along this journey. And I encourage you to have the courage, it takes a lot of courage these days, to have the courage to step forward. And if God is truly calling you and you follow the call, you will be most happy.
For more information on the priesthood or religious life, log on to EWTN.com/religious life.
Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guests today. They are authors of this great book, A Mind at Peace, Reclaiming an Ordered Soul in the Age of Distraction. I love that concept of an ordered soul. I bet you do too. And you're going to find out how to do it in this book, which is available for you at EWTN's Religious Catalog. That's EWTNRC.com. Get out there and get a copy for yourself and your friends and all of your loved ones as well. And we've got this program available for you on DVD at EWTNRC.com, the home of Holy Reminders. Well, gentlemen, we have Anna with us, and she's from Massachusetts. Good morning, Anna.
Hi, Johnnette. Thank you very much for taking my call. It's amazing. First, I have to say thank you for EWTN. I learned so many things, but I couldn't see a book better than this, because that's what I talk about all the time. I'm 66, and I have 9 kids and nieces and nephews. And I'm afraid with this because, everything in moderation is good. But when I see the kids nowadays, just the parents just kind of babysit their kids with this type of thing as early as months. So it's really, I really think what it will be their future. Mm-hmm. And it concerns me. I see a lot of people with Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And I said, future-wise, there's going to be a lot of problems of this nature. And yes. Another thing is just concentration. I have the kids in the alternative reading, doing different things like design and stuff like that kids enjoy in the past. Just kids being in harmony with the nature, like playing with even dirt and stones and stuff like that. That's really bring happiness and long life and stuff like that. Sometimes I see kids saying, I'm catechist also saying, oh, they don't like to go to school. The school is bored. So it's really giving me a great concern. So, when I see, I said I have to call. I'm looking forward to order this book. But this is the concern and the communication in the house. You don't see much talking around the table. People sit in different rooms and entertain themselves. Yes. What about the rest of the family? And sometimes just like have some friends to call with the rest of the friends that you already have a friend.
Well, that's exactly right. And we see that oftentimes in restaurants. I can't tell you how many times, and you've experienced it too, I know you must. You go to a restaurant and there's a whole family, and they're sitting there and they're all on their smartphones, and nobody's paying attention to each other. And this is bad. And I want to comment too, Anne, I want to congratulate you, because you intuitively know there's something the matter with this, right? Yeah. And your concern is justified. This reconnection with people is so important. What I wanted to share with you too and ask you about before we go to Maryland and California is this whole notion of the way in which technology has decreased our ability to make a cogent argument, and I don't mean arguing with each other, but to critically evaluate something, to maintain an idea in the head for longer than 10 seconds. Even 10 seconds is too long. So we've created a type of attention deficit disorder culture.
Yes.
Haven't we?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And again, the smartphone, which is driving it today, is simply the logical extension, in this case, of the newspaper. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful article from the early 1990s by a sociologist named C. John Somerville called "Why the News Makes Us Dumb." It was published in First Things.
Oh my goodness, I'll have to look for that.
It's a wonderful account of how the daily consumption of what's brand new is hindering us from pursuing matters from the right starting point to the right conclusion, and as you say, constructing an argument in the sense of connecting cause with effect and beginning with end, right?
Put together a syllogism.
Yes, well, in so many words, exactly, right. And so the smartphone pattern of use where one is picking it up and watching a 90-second YouTube video is just the craftiest ploy of a demonic assault that's been going on for a very long time. And yes, it's good that we wake up to it and remember that God wants us to use our wits, right, to think through life in view of what He has revealed to us, in view of what we know from our own nature, and then choose according to that thought process.
That's right. And it goes all the way back to the first Facebook question. You know, there is a good. Of course there is a good. But the good is not overconsumption, which then begins to take away our capacity as human persons.
We call this the digital age. We also call it the age of information. And the assumption is that information is always good and that more information is always better, right? But notice it's not called the age of wisdom.
That's true.
Right?
That's right.
The age of good judgment. Right? And
nor the age of knowledge.
Sometimes more information is worse for you. Sometimes the news does make you dumber. Most information is noise, not signal. Most information is distracting and diverting, and it will grab your attention, but it's not meaningful, it's not important, it doesn't serve your good. And the judgment, simply to recognize that theoretical distinction requires attention, and then to apply that theoretical distinction in your own life so that you can ask, okay, do I seek this just because it's more information, or is this actually good for me? That's the question people have to ask.
I'll give you a personal example of that. You know, I was a consumer of news, you know, EWTN and the news channel that I watched, you know, 24/7, right? Until I began to realize that I was getting agitated. My blood pressure was going up. I couldn't sleep at night. And I connected it to the fact that, wait a second, this is all keeping you riled up, and all you're watching is a bunch of talking heads yelling and screaming at each other, and nobody can express a thought. There's not even the common courtesy and civility of letting somebody get their answer out before you're jumping on top of them, and that keeps us all like this, frantic, and it leads to health issues. So there is a direct correlation between this. So pulling ourselves back is a good thing. I have turned the news off. I haven't watched it in a long time. I'll bits and pieces.
And you're more wise about politics because of it, because you're less informed.
Yeah, well, less informed.
You can be more sensitive to the more subtle, quieter, but deeper signals about the political world.
Well, I hope that's true. I mean, I hope that that's true. We'll see. But the fact of the matter is, I think that for our health, at least for my health, it was an important move on my part. We only have 2 minutes left, but we're going to try to get to Maryland and California. So, Maryland, I'm going to ask you to be succinct. Be pithy in what you say, darling. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I was sitting here waiting for Rosary, and I'm so glad I caught your show today.
Thank you.
Because I'm an elderly person, and I have quite a few great-grandchildren. And Christmas time, and it has struck a chord with me, and I just can't get it out of my mind. But I fixed the problem. My great-grandson came to the door with his grandfather, and I noticed something different. I kept saying, "Where is Landon? Where is he?" And I would go find him in the house, and he'd be on his, I call it the devil's tool. And I said, "Could you please put that down until I had something important to tell him about his heritage." And I thought we could talk.
Yes.
And, oh no, it was that thing.
Right.
So
And I have to interrupt you there, Marilyn, but you bring up an important point. We can see these signs of addictive behavior very, very early on. And I want to take these last 30 seconds to thank the two of you. I don't know where the time has gone. It's flown away. You've been such a wonderful example of the way in which we need to take things seriously and begin to look at the deeper meaning and evaluate them according to the good, the true, and the beautiful, and the standards of how does this enhance my personhood and my image and likeness of God. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's
Thanks,
been a
Johnnette.
sheer joy. Thank you.
Good.
Out there you go, EWTN's Religious Catalog. Bye-bye now.